Have we modified any times or anything?
I don't think so. I think we're still on the regular schedule.
Okay, so we're going to want to go ahead and get started. So, and if anybody else joins us later, we'll let them in. So, welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Lash. I am an account manager for Abdo Publishing and SQ and Associates here in Region 13. I'm in Pflugerville. So welcome to all of those of you that are maybe from further away and elsewhere. We're going to be joined today by Duchess Harris. Our session is going to be a little bit different because we are honored to have Duchess here this morning. So good morning, Duchess. Glad you're here. Duchess is going to be sharing some information about the collection of library books that she has written for Abdo. She's also going to be sharing a very special announcement. You heard it, you're going to hear it here first. So we're excited about that. My Houston area colleague, Jamie Garcia, is also going to be helping out in the chat and with any questions that you might have. Before I turn this over to Duchess, I want to share a little something with you. Last year at this event, LibCamp, Duchess shared some information with us and had a presentation. And one of the participants, Kara Johnson, asked if Duchess was going to be doing a book on the Tulsa race riots. And Duchess is like, funny you should ask, because she had a book coming out that fall about that. And as I listened to this, I'm like, Tulsa race riots, what is that? And I ran home and I Googled and had to figure out what it was. I didn't know. I did not know. So those kinds of things are going to kind of be the focus of where we're headed today. And without anything else, I'm going to turn this over to Duchess. I'll remind you of, please communicate with us through chat and we'll get to your questions. So I know Jamie just dropped a couple of questions in the chat, so it'd be great if you would respond to those while Duchess gets started. Duchess, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so excited to be back this year. This is such a great event. I send you greetings from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, where I'm pretty sure it's somewhat cooler outside than it is where you all are. So as Lisa said, I am an author for Abdo Publishing, and I have a collection of 115 books that are for 4th to 12th graders, and most of them focus on social justice issues. I also do other work. I am an academic researcher, and my job is to make the invisible visible. So to give you an idea of how I do that, if you remember 3 years ago when the Hollywood film Hidden Figures came out, I was one of the researchers that went to the archives and got the materials that led to that script. And so I'm also a professor at McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And 2 weeks ago, I was asked to do a presentation to our alumni network. We had to cancel reunion. People were disappointed about that. And so we had a virtual reunion and 450 people attended. I gave a presentation on a book that I'd written for Abdo entitled Race and Policing. One of the questions that was posed to me is, what's missing in the approach to teaching full American history? And my answer was that I've been on the faculty for 25 years. We've moved from being colorblind to diversity. Then we started having some conversations about justice. We really haven't talked about what justice looks like, and there hasn't been a lot of historical context. And so, as you all are aware, because I live in the Minneapolis area, this is where George Floyd was killed. We're the epicenter of these discussions. And I mentioned that people are shocked about George Floyd because they hadn't learned about Emmett Till in high school. After Lisa saw this talk, she took the initiative to do some research and find out how many books there are out there about Emmett Till on this level of, like, say, 4th to 12th graders. She found 6 in the country. And so that kind of proves my point as to why I am inspired to do the work that I do. So why is this work important to me? These topics are important to me clearly because as a writer, I want to, evoke this knowledge. But the way that it operates in the college classroom is, I always tell my math colleagues, when you get a student in college, you've never gotten a student that didn't have algebra or pre-calculus in high school. They might not have had calculus, but they've had some kind of math. When students come to my classroom and I say, what do you know about Black people during the time of World War II? I usually get nothing, okay? And so that's a problem because it gets in the way of my teaching. And so this past spring semester, I taught a course called Race and the Law, and I used the 6 books from my series about race and the law, which are divided in terms of public policy issues for ABDO. And I had first-year college students who loved the books, who said they would have felt more prepared for college if they had read those books in the 11th or 12th grade. And so that's one of the reasons why I think these books should be in libraries for younger people. I'm also impacted by this topic because, I'm an African-American parent. So I thought I'd share with you, this is a picture of my family. That's my husband, John, and these are our 3 kids. Our oldest is Austin. Our daughter is in the middle. I let her drive today for the first time. Her name's Abby. And the little peanut is Zach. And so it's important to me that my kids learn about African-American history, culture, and traditions, but I think everyone needs to learn this. And so that leads to really what the topic for today is, which is, how can our library collections shine light on making this invisible history visible? How can we make that happen? And I really want to be a part of making that happen. So I was so glad that Lisa shared that last year she did not know what the Tulsa race riots were. She's in good company. I would argue that the majority of the nation had not heard of this event. A little scenario that I'll share with you that kind of brings that to light is that there's a law firm in Minneapolis called Robbins Kaplan. One of the senior partners in Robbins Kaplan was watching an HBO show called Watchmen. And Watchmen did an episode that depicted some of the events from the Tulsa race riots. He was so compelled by this, he asked himself if this was fiction, right? So is this the writing of, Regina King, or did this event actually happen? He goes and looks it up the way Lisa did and realizes that it actually happened. And he wanted me to come in last February to speak about it at this law firm in Minneapolis. So when I went to give the talk, it was around the time that this newspaper article came out, which revealed that for the first time in almost 100 years, the curriculum had passed so that the Tulsa Race Massacre could be taught about in Oklahoma schools. This explains a lot. People say, why didn't I know about this? Well, you didn't know about it because it wasn't in the curriculum, and it also wasn't in libraries. You might have noticed that I interchangeably use the terms riot and massacre. I just want to read you a brief snippet from the book to explain what the difference is with the terms. And so I write in the book, some historians say the attack on Greenwood, and that's the Black neighborhood in Oklahoma, should be called a massacre, not a race riot. A riot is violence committed by a group that wants to cause disruption. A massacre is the killing of helpless people out of cruelty. And so, of course, one of the projects that I have for young people in the book is to talk about which term resonates with you the most and why. So, with all that, I'll just briefly say that what I'm trying to convey in the book is the story of Black Wall Street. And what this was is that after emancipation, there was a migration pattern to the area of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And around 1905, oil is discovered there, similar to your history in Texas. What a lot of people don't know is that only white men were allowed to work in the oil fields. What the black men did in turn was decide that they could profit from feeding and housing and entertaining the white oil workers. And so they set up businesses to make sure that this would happen. And their businesses ended up growing and becoming prosperous. So even though their businesses were prosperous, this area at this time was segregated like many areas in the United States. And so the housing rules were that if 3/4 of the residents were of one race, then the other race couldn't live there. And a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't just a social notion, that was a legal construct. And so you had to exist where the local government drew the line. This meant that Black Tulsans lived in Greenwood and white residents had the opportunity to live just about every place else. So how did all of this chaos evolve? Because when you learn about this event, it's pretty chaotic. Quite simply, in 1921, there was a black man who was a shoe shiner named Dick Rowland. He gets into an elevator and he stumbles and he falls into the elevator operator. It's the 1920s, so that's how operators are run at the time. And he falls into her and people in the building hear her scream. She screams because, she's somewhat injured by this. The people in the building who hear the screaming make the assumption that because he's a black man, he has sexually assaulted her, which is not true at all. And so a white mob gathers outside of the courthouse in Tulsa. When I say mob, nearly 2,000 people. And it ends up ensuing a lot of problems. And one of the things that some of the white residents decide to do is to break into the Black-owned businesses in Greenwood. And they start stealing things from the businesses and they set them on fire. The reason why they do this is because of, the economic competition and the jealousy that you have this community that's starting to thrive and do well. So I include a timeline in the book, and the timeline just shows that between stumbling in the elevator at 3 p.m., between then and 10 p.m., you have all of this chaos ensuing. And so firefighters try to come and, bring some order, and the mob actually does not allow them to do the job and meets them at gunpoint. Also, when the law shows up and decides what they're going to do, they end up rounding up the African Americans and putting them in animal pens and pushing them off to the side. The Red Cross tries to be helpful, and they report that 300 people have died, but the mainstream newspapers deny that and say that it's only 30 people. So much of this is how the story is told. And so once the armed guards place at least 4,000 people into animal pens, then they set up a system where Black Americans are required to carry IDs and to prove where they live. Even though the Red Cross tries to help, even though the NAACP tries to help, the local Oklahoma government refuses to help. And so that is what part of the problem is. What are some of the results of this? Some of the results is that a graph that I include in the book is that Black businesses are booming until this incident occurs, and then they start to go on the decline. They end up going on the decline so much that the neighborhood and the community ends up changing drastically, and they lose their middle class status. So students like to ask all the time, what about reconstructed? How is the area rebuilt? Well, the mayor of Tulsa creates a reconstruction committee, but the committee doesn't put a lot of effort into reconstructing the area. And if you know anything about Southern history, that's pretty common. So that meant that the Black residents of Greenwood would be responsible for rebuilding their neighborhood on their own. So this riot or massacre, however you want to refer to it, has a legacy. And part of the legacy is the notion of, do we know anything about it? And so there were people in Oklahoma who are clearly ashamed about this and do everything that they can to ignore this history and to bury this history. And it isn't until 2012 that students in Oklahoma start to learn about this history. And once again, it has to go through the legislature and a law is passed, which then fast forwards us to this year, where you go from 2012 that you're allowed to learn about it to 2020, where it's actually officially a part of the curriculum, which is so important. So how do we repair these past harms? There are a lot of people who are resistant to a notion of reparations because people think that reparations are when communities say, I want money, write me a check. That's not necessarily what repair is. Repair can be restorative justice. And to me, a perfect example of that is this Black Wall Street Memorial, which is being built right now and is a way for people to read a book like mine, change the curriculum, and then actually have a physical site to visit. And so why do I think this is so important? Living in a place like Minneapolis, St. Paul, that hasn't just had the George Floyd incident, but also 4 years ago had Philando Castile, all the research shows that children have a difficult time performing in school after we go through these moments. Also, adults can have a difficult time performing on their jobs. The Fortune 500 companies in Minneapolis, St. Paul actually gave people 4 days paid leave after the killing of George Floyd. So studies show that it can take months to recover from this, but unfortunately, these incidents have been happening so frequently, just as we start to heal, something else can happen. And so the upside is that students are eager to learn. So back in the spring, before we ended up in quarantine with COVID, I met with a group of students at a museum in the Twin Cities. You can see the young lady in the front who's wearing the Covenant sweatshirt is holding the book. And I talked to them about Tulsa, and they were delighted to hear about it because they felt empowered in terms of hearing a story of recovery and eventual triumph. And so how timely is this? Just 2 days ago, there's a story in the Washington Post that shows this image. What this image is a group of archaeologists who are in the Greenwood area who are trying to excavate the bodies of the people who were killed during this massacre or riot. And this is so important because this also links to restorative justice, and it also shows that there were definitely more than 30 people killed. So here is my groundbreaking news that Lisa said that you all are the first people to learn about this. Hot off the press are the jacket covers. I have 8 new books coming out in January. These jacket covers are from the core library line, which is for the 4th to 8th graders. And the top one is Justice for George Floyd. And then the other one, of course, is the history of racism in America. They will be part of a series that I am in the works of developing, but will be complete and available soon, on racism in modern America. There will also be 2 books for older high school students about the killing of George Floyd and policing in America, which of course have more challenging vocabulary, and those are 112 pages. So with that, I encourage you to think about all the books in my collection, because I think clearly I'm biased, but I think they offer what has been missing for so long in library acquisitions, that you have historical reflections of events that people might not be familiar with. If you look at this slide in the bottom right-hand corner, you see the image of a man named Calvin Spann. I worked with Jamie Garcia and Lisa Lash just recently to do a webinar with Calvin Spann's daughter. Calvin Spann was a Tuskegee Airman. And so I wanted to tell the story of one Tuskegee Airman in particular, so you could see who he was as a person, which is different than just the whole concept of Black men who fought fighter planes. So with that, as your libraries get these books, I encourage you to read them as well, because if you don't keep up and the kids keep up, then you won't be smarter than a 5th grader. So that's my little baby Zach when he was in the 5th grade. He's no longer in the 5th grade. But I tell people, you don't want Zach to know more than you do. So you have to stay on point. And with that, Lisa has provided support resources. I think all of this will be available in the chat, where you can think about how you present this material. This is a current list of lesson plans, teaching guides, other resources. And she's also provided a link to the Let's Talk About Race webinar. And then there's resources that focus on early childhood. So with that, I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time. I'm excited to take your questions, and thanks for listening.
Duchess, thank you so very much. We really appreciate that. And, just in case y'all didn't catch it, she is one busy woman right now. So I can't tell you how grateful I am that you took time out of your writing and all of the speaking that you're doing, and being a mom stuck in a house with teenagers. I get that. So I know Duchess would love to answer any of your questions. I know some of you said you were actually using your Duchess's books. Who was that?
Yeah, tell me about that. That makes me happy.
I got to look back. Who was that? Let's see.
Looks like that was Yvonne Steckel.
Oh, okay. Yvonne.
Hi. We have a magnet program. And part of the component of it is it's humanities, and social justice is a big part of it. And so in the summer, they're having capstone projects where they choose social justice issues, and several people have chosen a couple of Duchess's books. So it's been really exciting. And they're also multi-user, so I feel like I can throw it out there and everybody can use it.
Awesome. That's so good to hear.
So
it's been really good.
What grade level, Yvonne?
Sixth to 8th grade.
Okay.
In Austin ISD.
Well, thank you for that.
Perfect. Anybody else suggestions on how you might use this? There's so many ways, particularly direct curriculum correlations, certainly in social studies. Any other ideas from any of you? And this is the moment when there's dead silence.
I just like the fact that there are biographies that are different from the same old, same old. Our fifth graders do a unit, a biographical unit, and it's, as I say, it's wonderful to be able to present different voices and relevant current voices. So thank you so much.
Well, you are so welcome. And I have to tell you, one of the reasons why I opened up with a little bit about my background is that this is a true story. My son, Zach, who's going into the 9th grade in the fall, when he was in the 5th grade, he was asked to do a book report based on a biography. And he could have done Booker T. Washington, right? There's great books out there. I mean, there's Rosa Parks. There's that. All of that is fantastic. And my dear friend Gay Spann, we went to college together, and I had just seen online she was celebrating some of the work of her dad. And so I asked her, I was like, what did you think about my son writing about your dad? Maybe he could talk to you on the phone. He'll do his own research. He will illustrate it. That was 3 years before I decided I wanted to present the idea to Abdo. And it came out of that experience that there need to be these books where, you're not doing the same person.
One thing we have in our school, and I think it is, I'm not a native Texan, but I think it's part of the Texas state curriculum, is 3rd grade living museum, where the students read a biography and then become that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said your books are 4th to 12th, and obviously a whole bunch of 3rd graders can read 4th grade level books. But if you're ever thinking about even going to a little bit lower level, I think that'd be really cool too.
I'll talk to them about that.
Those who were books are like flying off the shelf.
That's awesome. Any other, we'd love just a last minute contribution. Janet, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that idea of the living museum, and the core library books are very, definitely accessible for a lot of your 3rd graders. Okay, well, I know we're at our time limit, I think. You guys, thank you all so very much for joining us. My contact information is there in the chat. Jamie, thanks for helping us out. And Duchess, we are blessed to have your expertise and just your willingness to share with us.
It was fun as always. I hope I see you all next year.
Okay. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day.
Let's hope you won't have anything awful to write about next year.
That too. Thank you for that. That too.
Only books that are about good things happening.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody.